The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Today, I am joined by Jaime Klein. Jaime, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. How fun that we get to do this.
I know, I'm excited. So, Jaime, for those that aren't familiar with you and your work, you are the founder and CEO of Inspire Human Resources, where you help Fortune 500 organizations solve HR challenges. You worked with many very well-known organizations, LinkedIn, Etsy, in terms of TED Talks, New York Times, Viacom, CBS, and a whole bunch of others. You've also been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, ABC News, and the list goes on and on. We're going to talk about how you've built your consulting business to 30 or so people and just created massive success. But before we do that, I thought we could start off with the early days. What drew you to the world of HR?
Yeah. So I was always fascinated from my early years working in how to motivate and create culture and create that stickiness. I started my career in DC in the Watergate building, actually at a company called the Corporate Executive Board, which was a kind of HR think tank. So had the pleasure of 20-something right out of University of Maryland, just being in that dialogue, because that's the exact advisory work that we were doing for our clients. So I was like doing HR for a company that did HR consulting. So yeah.
There we go. And does that come from someplace like when you were younger that you just always loved people and you wanted to inspire, motivate, or was there an early job or a summer camp or I don't know, something that just where like the light bulb went off for you and you thought, I want to do more of this?
Yeah. So I grew up at Camp Ramah, which is a summer camp in upstate New York. And through my 8 summers there, I think definitely saw that the way that magic, that sleepaway camp magic happened, the tone was set at the top. And when the director of the camp was like, you know what, folks, it's raining, but no worries. We're going to have a good time with a song session. Like I just kind of saw how that was contagious. And one summer I worked in a unit of kids who had developmental and behavioral disabilities. And I was like a counselor in training for that bunk. And specifically in that summer, I saw that every counselor in the unit just led with heart, no matter the situation that they were put in. And so those are probably some of the earlier experiences. But I've kind of always been an extrovert since my parents met me, since the day I arrived, I'm told. So I've kind of always rolled this way. Yeah.
Right. Nice. Yeah. No, I love that example of the camp. I mean, it's so true, like how a true leader, they can turn any situation into one that people are excited about. And here I'm in Vancouver where it does rain quite a bit. So I can apply that mindset to playing with my girls outside and getting out when for much of the year it doesn't feel like you necessarily want to go out that much.
Absolutely. What do they say? There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, right? So if you're ready for the elements, you're ready to go.
That's exactly what I was thinking this morning with my run at 6 something in the morning when it's pitch black outside. I'm getting rained on like it's a tropical monsoon, except it's not warm, it's cold. So yeah, I had to apply that positive mindset when I was running today. I mean, you've accomplished a lot in terms of building your company to the point that it's at today. But I'd love to know a little bit more about, you mentioned you were kind of the executive conference board, corporate executive. Okay. So was that where you were working just before you started Inspire, or were you doing something else?
I was at American Express. I had done grad school at Columbia and they do campus recruiting where they come on campus. And I was thrilled to be in this campus recruiting program and worked at American Express for 3 years and was there right before I launched Inspire.
Okay. So I think 2007 or so, you started Inspire.
Exactly. So I was at Amex until 2005 when the doctor surprised when the doctor surprised my husband and I and said, surprise, I know you want to start a family, but you are due with twins. And in the chapter of I Plan, God Laughs, I was like, oh, no worries. We'll have these twins. My husband was working full time. He was at NYU starting business school at night. And I thought, oh, we can do this. And the twins came a touch early. They were preemies. And so Amex, so supportive, best place to work by every measure. But I really needed to step back for a year and focus on helping our kids hit their potential. So I left MX. And when our kids were about a year and the doctor said the Klein twins are going to be all sorts of great, I kind of looked up from that chapter and I thought, how do I ensure that I am very intentional about raising the kids in a very hands-on way while still using that cerebral part of myself? So this is one of these like corner of the living room with like the Elmo doll and the Thomas the Train stuff all over my floor, 2 preemie twins crawling around. I thought, well, why don't I do this thing where I can do intentional work part-time around the schedule of raising them? And unfortunately, at that time, or fortunately, there was no category for that. There was like this like tech IT part-time consulting. You could like hire tech people, but there was nothing that existed for HR. So that was really the moment. And I share the story really openly because I've been on many a panel where other female founders will say, oh, I started my company because of a confluence in the market and market conditions. And I think, I guess, but typically humans do really bold, brave things because of something heartbreaking, heartwarming that has happened for them that really make them reevaluate. So I'm really honest about my story because I think it kind of gives other people the courage to kind of speak their truth about what motivates them and also like lean in and do the really hard thing when there isn't a roadmap to do so. So that's my story.
And how did you feel? So when you made that decision to kind of go out on your own instead of just returning to the corporate world, was that exciting or were you terrified? Like what was going on in your mind when you made that decision? And especially in the early kind of few weeks or so?
I was incredibly energized, like only needed 4 hours of sleep as long as I could get my hands on a good green smoothie level energized. I felt incredibly energized. I felt really mission driven because I really wanted to use that cerebral part of myself. And I found that as many work experiences or degrees that generation had, again, it's hard to imagine, but back in 2006, when I had the idea, I launched Jan 1, 2007, it just didn't exist. Like it just didn't exist to work part-time from home. It just, I know it's crazy because now we do like things like from our Apple Watch, but it just didn't exist. So I felt incredibly motivated. I didn't know I was creating a category, right? Like I just was incredibly motivated to show up for my family in the way that made sense for what our needs were. And also wanted to find a way to kind of recapture that part of myself that really was so energized by career. I loved working. Yeah.
Okay. So you're energized. You said, I'm starting my own HR consulting business. How do you go out and actually create a business with clients? Like where those first few clients come from?
Okay, so Q4 of 2004, I spoke to some very generous people and I asked them, other people had started businesses and asked them for their pearls of wisdom. And I spent a lot of Q4 2004 thinking through what the brand would be, what the website would look like, and how I would go to market.
So hold on. So this, just sorry to interrupt, but this was even before you launched the consulting business. So you're going back 2 years.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I apologize. It was Q4 2006. I'm home with my kiddos and I'm like, gosh, this is just, I want to do something. Sorry, it was then that I started doing some crowdsourcing. Thank you. Talked to other entrepreneurs who shared their pearls of wisdom, and it gave me ideas to develop. I think I had like $75. I went to vistaprint.com and got some business cards and had an old friend that I'd worked with who was generous enough to build a little website with like 4 pages. I sent a note out Jan 1, 2007 to like my entire distribution list. It was like my college roommate and her parents, like anyone I'd ever met, Michael. And it was like, and I just said, I've hung my own shingle. I'm available for any projects to focus on, to hire, train, and retain talent.
And was that an email? Do you send that individually, like manually one by one, or was it a group email?
I, in a BCC line, had 300 names of every family and friend member that I could think of. And it was from that we got our very first client because like my cousin's friend was doing an M&A deal and needed a hand. And I always share that story too, because like you just never know who at that moment might have a moment where they need whatever product or service you're offering. So yeah, that is literally how it started. It was the Vistaprint box of cards, this website, and this concept that I, at that time, I believe fractional work makes us whole, like whole as human beings to do other things. And I knew that I had about 20 hours a week to work. That was how things kind of started.
So you got the first client, which is great. And I love that example because so often people overthink, like they need to have everything just right and the perfect website and the perfect materials and everything decided before they tell the world. And really, it's just about telling the world, like, hey, here's what I'm doing. And then from that, you start to validate and get feedback. And in this case, as you saw, you got your first client, but what about the next one? So take me forward to like client number 2 and number 3. Where did they come from? And what were you doing in those early few months or so of the business to grow, to try and build the actual business and get those client number 2 and 3?
So thing number 1, again, this is going way back, but back in the time where people wrote handwritten thank you notes, any networking I did, any client that we had, like I had a certain playbook. There was a handwritten thank you note on the thickest cardstock that Vistaprint like offered you. Like you pay like $1 more, they'll give you like the thickest one. I was like, I wanted to go have like a premium brand. So I was like, I had these little note cards. And so what it looked like was trying to figure out, how to deliver and delight for that client. The next client was an organization that was a high growth ad agency. They needed training and a handbook. So an employee handbook. So that was something that I developed. How do you create an employee handbook?
Sorry to interrupt again, but how do they find you? How do they even come to you?
So this client number 2 was also from that email distribution list. It was like a friend of a person I dated like 20 years ago that I'd met twice.
It must have ended okay if they still...
It did end okay. So he was very generous and made an introduction, and it came from there. And then American Express heard that I was doing some work fractionally and asked if I could possibly come back and help by covering a parental leave for a former colleague. And I said, I'd be delighted to. And while there was someone that unfortunately had resigned without a whole lot of notice. And they said, oh, can you now stay on after this parental leave and help with her? And I said, it'd be my pleasure. And that felt like going home, right? That felt so great to be back with so many old colleagues and friends. That felt great. And things went from there. Then the next client, I think, was a friend of mine, was at dinner with someone who was building a company from scratch. It was like his 3rd company. And he's like, you know what I know from companies 1 and 2? I know that from the beginning, you need great HR infrastructure. Like he had learned from companies 1 and 2 as a serial entrepreneur. So that was a venture-backed client that we worked with. And then from there was another client that was in that portfolio, like another company that this company had. The people who had invested in them knew of another company, and it went from there. And I know the way I'm telling the story, it sounds like there were not bumps along the road. I can tell you about all of them, but this is just like the neat and tidy story of how we grew.
I think what I'm hearing from this, you were active, you sent out emails, there was partly from networking. The initial kind of momentum came through your network and relationships. So if we fast forward to today, you're now a company of about 30 or so people. What does your marketing lead generation look like today? What's working best for you to bring in more business or new business for the company?
This is going to sound really old school, but most of our business comes through referrals. So I grew up fishing, and I swear to God, like every time I catch a fish, I'm like an 8-year-old. I get so excited. Every time we have a new client, I get so excited as if we have just started. And I feel this mission to deliver and delight. So I think that is kind of spread to the way that we work. And I think essentially when we do, I now kind of feel like you're only as good as your last project, right? It's like every single time we do a project, I feel like we're just always trying to be really humble about it. Your question is, how do we do the marketing? So we, at this point, do a lot of outreach to everyone that we have relationships with. And we send out about 4 years now, I guess, 5 years, we've been sending out blogs on a periodic basis. There's no shortage of HR challenges in this moment that we find ourselves in. And so whatever kind of the hot thing is that's going on, that's kind of keeping people up at night, we're trying to always do blogs about that. My favorite blogs are the ones that we're talking about the things that like no one is talking about yet, like the next thing. At the start of the pandemic, we heard everybody up nights and weekends trying to solve the same problems. And we were like, we just need to like get people together. So in April or May of 2020, we started a monthly panel called the Inspire Live series, where we get together a bunch of experts in the field. We try to always have on an Inspire expert, one of our 30 so people, to talk about whatever that topic is. We host monthly salons for heads of HR, chief people officers, VPs, very senior level groups to get together and really workshop all the things keeping them up at night. That's not as much of a marketing effort, but like something that I'm very focused on these days. We've had a bit of press. So we don't have a PR company, but I've done a lot of reach out over time to journalists just to say, hey, I see that you covered this topic in the press. If you ever need a source, please let me know. And it's so interesting. It's like anything. It's like years ago, I helped someone with a story, and then someone saw that story and they asked if we could help with their piece. So there's been things that have come up with the press.
So question for you. So, I mean, it sounds like, you're doing a lot of what some people would call like thought leadership in terms of creating content and panels and finding ways to provide valuable information to the community and to those that you serve. It sounds like a lot of that is kind of related or shared with those that you already have a relationship with. Are you sending any of that information in terms of like articles or videos or anything of that nature to people that you do not yet have a relationship with yet? Okay, so it's only people that you have a relationship with.
It is. And we post on LinkedIn. So I guess folks that, yeah.
And I have one other question around that. So you said that you get a lot of your business through referrals, right? That's a big engine. Is there anything that you do as part of your client and project delivery and the engagements that you feel is just so necessary? Like it's a really critical part of the work that helps to create more referrals. You look at others out there and you go, yeah, they're providing their service or product, but like they're missing such a big opportunity to generate more business.
It's interesting. What I've learned over time is that it's like anything. When you trust someone, you just kind of have them in speed dial for whatever the next thing is that might stump you. That's the way I operate on the home front and really the work front. And I think that at the beginning, when we're speaking to a client about advising them with HR, filling in a parental leave, whatever it might be, we spend a lot of time up front aligning on what it is that their needs are. And then we'll have them interview 1, 2, sometimes 3 candidates to make sure it's that culture fit, like they can just really vibe with each other. And I think that's really key to make sure that we kind of like hit the ground running with that kind of chemistry in place. And then we do weekly check-ins with our experts to see how things are going, any friction, what's going well. Do you need anything from the Inspire Toolkit to help out along the way? And then we'll check in with the client multiple times about the engagement to make sure that things are on track, we're exceeding expectations. So I don't know if that's like rocket science stuff, but like it's definitely the way that we roll. Like that's definitely kind of part of the DNA. And there's a cost to that, right? Like we have a whole leadership team that makes sure that we can deliver and delight. And this isn't just like scotch tape together. So yeah, that's kind of, I think that's probably a little bit of our secret sauce is just being really intentional and creating this like premium experience where it isn't just like a headhunter that just makes a match. God love headhunters, but like it's really, we feel like we want to provide our clients with CHRO whisperers, like people who can really advise at that senior level, and that chemistry is key. So your question was, does that lead to roles? I guess because they feel like if they whispered for me, then they should probably whisper for a couple of my friends, right? I guess.
That makes a lot of sense. So one of the questions I wanted to kind of ask you later, but I think now is a good time. There's a lot of HR consulting firms out there, right? So in terms of how you create that competitive advantage or differentiation, you mentioned things like having a close relationship with the buyer or the client and providing great service and delighting and caring and like having frequent check-ins. But if I put on like my outsider's hat and I listen to that, I go, well, everybody says that, or like everybody could essentially do the same thing. Like they're checking in often. So I'm wondering, like, if you pull that up a little bit, like, is there something else that you feel that's going on, or something that maybe if you look back, you were very intentional with, or maybe still are very intentional with, in terms of like, how do you differentiate Inspire from all the other HR consulting firms out there?
Probably, this is going to maybe sound really cliche also, but here goes. I'm going to be honest. I feel like we have a really rigorous recruiting process where we look for folks who have like been there, done that at really senior levels and have no ego. They're at a moment in time where they really want to parachute in and just do the really beautiful work. They're just at a moment in time where they don't want to lead the global HR function or lead the global benefits function. But what they really want to do is show up for other areas of their life. So they're happy to do this work on more of a part-time basis. And so I think that what happens is a lot of times our clients feel like they have this gift of someone that is a real peer that they can really talk shop with. So that is, I think, a differentiator. The other thing is our experts are crazy seasoned experience, and they also have access to I call it the Inspire way. It's like we're constantly sharing information with them about whatever the latest thing is that's stumping HR leaders. So it saves them a ton of time. They're not just finding that stuff because they can grab it from our research and toolkit.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching Program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
I saw it on your website, like in terms of your team and the percentage of people that have corporate experience or number of years of HR experience. I could see that. Okay, I know. I appreciate you sharing that. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Jaime, so you have several different services that your company provides: talent management, talent acquisition, total rewards, kind of general HR consulting. Does one of those, like, what would you say is the percentage of business? If you just kind of look at your total business, percentage would each one of those be? Is it an even distribution? Is one the lion's share? How do you kind of look at that?
It's a great question. I think it has often depended on whatever is going on with work. I would say in the last couple of years, it is the percentage wise, maybe almost 50% has been HR business partner, because I think that it's like Pilates. It's like all about strengthening the core of people, the people function right now with everything that's thrown at HR leaders. I think folks are pretty overwhelmed. I think that under the banner of total rewards, comp and ben, maybe that, and then maybe it's split evenly. I think 50% kind of evenly covers the other three lines of service. The thing that we do, I was thinking that probably differentiates us from clients before, sorry, to your earlier question, is we're always approaching it with an inclusive lens. And I think, I don't know, when I listen to a lot of I'm just not sure that other HR consulting firms like ours kind of do that. So like, for example, if we're going to do a project about benefits to, let's say, cover an asset management in New York City for 8 months, when we go in, we try to be very intentional about looking for opportunities to bring an inclusive lens. So we might ask questions like, hey, do your in-network mental health providers have strong BIPOC representation? Or do your primary care physicians that are in network give annual physicals to transgender colleagues without any hiccups? So we just try to bring these things up. And sometimes I think clients appreciate us asking the tough questions. Sometimes I think they're a little bit like, that was not in the scope of work. But I don't have, this is how my mom taught me. That's just how I kind of approach life and how I approach when I look at a company. There's always that piece of it. So part of the Inspire way is being like, all right, if we're going to HR initiative is just bringing in that lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. So that is, I think, a big piece of what we do. And I think that after the murder of George Floyd here in the US, there was such an overdue racial reckoning. And so many clients really focused on their DEIB strategy and making sure that they were really consistent to all of their stakeholders about what that was. And it breaks my heart, but I've seen a touch less energy among companies over the last bit of time. And I'm just always trying to elevate it again into the conversation so that we just keep on as humans trying to strengthen that muscle. And it's really not about the business case, but about the human case of making sure that we're always being true to that.
There's two different questions that you kind of pose as examples. I think what's very powerful that every consultant, doesn't matter where you're located in the world or what your industry is, can ask is a question that gets the buyer or client to think about things they maybe have not thought about before, or maybe they haven't just given it the time and attention that it deserves. And so by you asking that, not only does that demonstrate kind of your authority and expertise and knowledge of the domain, but it also typically kind of creates a little bit a source of value, because now they need to actually respond to it and go, well, no, actually, we don't have a good plan for that. What does it look like? And so now you can have a conversation around that, which provides even further opportunity for you to demonstrate value for that client.
And I think sometimes in the work that we do, it's okay that the client doesn't have the answer, right? I think our job is I always want our clients to feel like they're the smartest one in the room. Whenever they're talking to one of our experts, maybe they've learned a couple things, maybe it's elevated their thinking. I want them to go to their next meeting with their C-level peers at their company and just be the smartest one in the rooms and have them start raising these questions. It's cool with us that they don't have the answers. I just want to always be planting these seeds.
So today you're a team of about 30 or so. Take me back to 2007 or even the first year, 2008. Was this the intention and goal from the beginning? Did you know and did you want to select a model for your consulting business where essentially it was going to be a firm team model? Or did you go in thinking, I'm going to be a solo independent consultant and it's probably just going to be me and maybe one or two other people? How has the vision for the business changed?
Okay, this is such a great question. And straight up, there was never a business plan. I just knew I wanted to raise Benjamin and Anna in a very specific way. And I just missed working. It was that pure and that straight up. So I think that from the beginning, my intention was that I wanted to work, call it 25 hours a week. And that as the market kind of like was like, that's not a crazy idea. We can do that. Let's try it. Then I would hire other folks to work with me. Like that's as far as I got. And the other thing I got into, I had envisioned having pods in different cities, right? Like maybe there would be like a network of people in Atlanta and Chicago. And what's so interesting is that, again, I plan, God laughs, the world is zip code agnostic. As long as you, like, it doesn't matter. So what's been so cool is to see the last 2 years that like the growth has kind of exceeded kind of what I was thinking, because companies just want the best talent. Doesn't matter where they hail from. It's really funny how that, but the vision. So I, in my bones, never thought it was just going to be me. This is typically not how I roll. Because you know what happened too? I think that once I saw that I was able to show up for my family and work, it became pretty mission driven, that when I met other folks for whatever it was, aging parents, whatever the thing was, we have a woman on our team. She's a singer and she has a fantastic, gorgeous voice, like the likes of Barbara Streisand. That's her thing. That's really passionate for her. We have a breast cancer survivor who's very active in breast cancer awareness. So people of all different things that make them whole. And when I've met fabulous people with no ego who want to really show up for that area of their life, I am on a mission to find them awesome clients to work with, because I want them to have their cup as full as I have felt. And so that just feels, I don't care how much work it takes to scale the company. I just want everyone to be like where they want to be and still be doing good work.
It's so interesting. I mean, we see many different consultants kind of coming into this with different goals or different vision or different paths. Some, and I would say actually is probably the most common, where people will be leaving the corporate world. They're tired of managing people and like they want freedom. So they start off as a solo independent consultant. And then after a period of time, okay, the business is going well. And now they realize, you know what, in order for me to make a bigger impact, or if I actually want to be able to take a proper holiday or whatever, and like still have a business running, I can't do this all myself. And so they start to find ways to build up a team, but others do come into it and they're very intentional from day one. It's like, no, I want this to be bigger than me. I want to have a team from day one if possible. So it's very interesting to see. And there's no right or wrong. Some just continue to be independent solo consultants and that works for them. But I think it's great when you find a model that works for you and you're intentional around it and then build towards that.
You know what? It was so interesting though. You just reminded me. So I think in my mind, I was like, oh, I want this to grow. But I, of course, had no idea how that was going to happen. What I did know is that I was someone who didn't need a ton of sleep, like literally, like I could like function pretty well on a little bit of sleep. And what I realized though is that I needed help with things like bookkeeping or creating marketing materials. And I was like, oh, if I could find maybe like a virtual assistant or like a virtual bookkeeper, like I think it was probably about a year, I was like, I can probably get a little bit more sleep if I can just find people to help me. And then, so it was the leadership team infrastructure stuff that I think was so interesting. I was like, what I realized is the more that I brought in people around me just to help with various parts of the company, the more we could grow. And that, I wish someone had told me that in 2006 when I was brainstorming on this. No one had mentioned that I had to kind of stumble on it. And then in terms of the experts, so many of them, I think probably 90% are really through a referral network. Meet someone through someone that recommended them. And then we meet with that person. We look at work samples. We check with multiple references that they've referred that they've reported to directly. We have a pretty rigorous process. Some of our experts might think it's too rigorous of a process. It's quite involved, but that building, I had no idea how it was going to happen. There wasn't like a private equity person. It was like me and these business cards. And the other thing that I did early on was I joined a group called In Good Company, which was a co-working space by the Flatiron building in Manhattan. Way before WeWork, these female founders were onto something. And I joined their first year so that they were open. And being in a collective of people that were looking to scale something. There was an attorney, a jewelry maker, a nutritionist, tons of different folks, but everyone was on a mission to really start something. And just so that kind of like positive peer pressure was helpful. And just to have people in community to bounce ideas off of you. How do you price things? What is this thing back then? It was like, what is this thing called social media? What is this new thing called LinkedIn? Like just figuring that stuff out and not having to spend a gazillion hours figuring out on my own. That was helpful.
Totally. I mean, having a community of like-minded people is so valuable in whatever industry you're in. So you talk about like building a team, and here you are today again, both 30 or so people. As the CEO, how do you think about hiring and building a team and the connection to revenue and profitability? Like, just take me through your thought process, because potentially you could always bring on another person, but you bring on another person and that's money potentially depends on your mindset around this, but out of your pocket, or the profit margin decreases. So walk me through your thought process maybe over the last few years, and especially if there's been any changes of how you think about hiring and building the team in connection to revenue and profitability.
So one clarifying thing, our leadership team members are all full-time. Our 30 plus experts are all fractional, meaning that they're all part-time W-2s in the US. We pay for their employer portion of the taxes, and they accrue for eligibility for 401k, and we accrue for sick time, etc. But if they are not on a project, they are not paid if they're paid when they're working. So I just want to clarify that. And so there is a margin that's needed to cover the running of the company. And it's been so interesting. The cost of doing business has gone up just a tad, I've found over the last couple of years in this pandemic moment that we find ourselves in, particularly. And so there's always trade-offs around how much infrastructure we need with the leadership team to kind of get things done. And what I've found is that the folks on our team typically love the work. They don't love doing business development. Like I would say 90% of them don't have a lot of marketing efforts up and running. If they've just said like, Jaime, like, it's just not my superpower. What I really want to do is the great work. Like I love doing the work, but I don't want to come up with a logo and a whole thing. But I think that the profitability is around figuring out what are the competitive hourly rates that we can pay to our team, and then figuring out what the market will bear in terms of price, and then make sure that we're always taking in whatever needs to happen for overhead. And it's so funny sitting here October 24th, I'm like very clear. And I feel like any CEO who thinks that they can even sense what the cost will be to run the business next isn't seeing the full picture. I think it's just been so interesting the last year just to kind of see all the additional things that are coming our way. So I'm always just trying to think about that as well, to just make sure the company continues to be sustainable.
So one kind of final question, or maybe one or two more after this, but in terms of, with your family, I'm wondering, you have a growing business, you have your core leadership team, you have these 30 or so people that they're part-time, but they're working with you and clients. How do you think about creating balance with your business and family in a sustainable way? Anything that you've adjusted over the years, or anything maybe as the company has grown? I'm just wondering, like, how do you make sure as best as possible that you are present and available for your family, but at the same time oversee and imagine you're running as a CEO of a growing consulting business?
So I am pretty obsessed with self-care. If you've ever attended any of our live series, we always try to end with the question to the HR leaders, what are you doing for self-care? Because I just feel like if we all can make a moment to put on our own oxygen mask first, we can help others. So there's a whole bunch of things that I do. I can share all my hacks with you.
Yeah, let's go through maybe 3 of your top self-care.
Okay, here we go. So one,
green smoothie.
I'm talking banana. There's always some avocado in there, some blueberry, etc. People feel like my family, like we're part of the witness protection program. I don't do a lot on social media. I will share with you, I have a little folder on my iPhone called Thieves, and all the social media is in there because I just know if I go on them, I lose my productivity. So if you were to like on my phone, click onto Instagram, it will say, what's your username and password? I have no idea what that is. And it's something that I hacked so that I just don't do that. I tend to have an allergic reaction to people that drain my time, family or friends. And I'm like really careful with that. I walk about 18 miles a week. I'm like out there no matter the weather, fleece, all the things, the bank robber, wool mask. But I always start my day with a power walk of 2-3 miles just to kind of keep it real. I sleep with my iPhone in a charging station in the living room. It's basically a power strip. And I just keep my phone there. And every morning I have a certain routine that I do before I touch that, because I just want to brush my teeth, start my face, get some oatmeal and my smoothie to start the day. I'm a pretty spiritual person, so I spend as much time as I can in nature. I have a lot of practices that I do that way. I journal. And when I start my day, before I do anything with work, I do a quick check-in on what the needs of my husband. We'll be married 20 years next month, and our 2 kiddos. They're applying to 12 colleges. All applications will be in, I think, within 8 days. It's a lot of fun in our house right now. A lot of project management and good stuff going on. So I really kind of start with that. And why? Because I've learned that if those things are in place, if mind, body, and soul is in a good place, my treasured kids and husband are in a good place, then bring it on. I can take on anything. I can handle the economic downturn of '08, the pandemic. I can pivot, but I need those things in place. And when they're not in place, my body tells me, because I feel like I've lost my sense of humor, or like I'm just not as forgiving. Like I'm like extra of myself, like I'm extra hard on myself. And I'm like, you are not walking 3 miles today, girl. You're walking 5, and you can't to your inbox until you walk the 5. So I've like learned over time.
No, I think you're not alone in that. I mean, I've certainly experienced that myself if there's something happening in the house, or there's a family member that's unwell, or something's going on, my mind, it's very hard to be productive in the business when personal stuff, right, is pulling you away. And so treating that stuff first, if that's in a good place, then whatever the economy might throw at you, external forces, they can't stop you, but personal stuff often will have a bigger dent. So I think it is such a good suggestion and idea to make sure that you're spending time on those things. Because if those things are good, then really it's hard for anything else to stop you. So I think that's some great ideas for people to.
My sister finds me so annoying. I don't do coffee or alcohol. I'm like the most fun designated driver you'll ever meet. I think that not everybody prescribe, so all these things, I just know thyself. And so I just like know what I got to do, but everybody's got their thing. So whatever your thing is, I'm like, lean into that thing. Yeah.
Yes, no, exactly. I agree. I think there's no right or wrong in certain areas, right? As long as people are doing anything illegal or whatever. But yeah, you find stuff that works for you, that helps you to feel good and to be a good person and to lean into those things. So Jaime, I want to thank you so much for coming on here today, sharing with us a little bit about your journey, your story, kind of how you got to where you are and built up the business. I think there's a lot of really good ideas that people can extract regardless of where they are in their consulting journey. But I want to make sure that people can learn more about you and about Inspire. Check out your Inspire live sessions, just even though they might be in a different industry. I think that concept is a really powerful one, something that we've definitely done a fair bit in the consulting community with our Clarity coaching program, or just other clients, of finding ways to bring other consultants together. So I think yours is another really good example of that. Where's the best place? I know it's not going to be social media based on what you just said. Where's the best place for people to go to learn more about you and Inspire?
You're so funny. So, and again, my marketing team's awesome. They post lots of stuff on LinkedIn. I do go on LinkedIn. It's just all the other ones that are so fun, but I just feel like I'm not able to get everything done. Let's see. InspireHumanResources.com. That's our place. Yeah, that's where folks can get us. Thank you so much. This was a ton of fun.
Yes, my pleasure. Great to have you on. And we will make sure to link that up in the show notes over at consultingsuccess.com. Jaime, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.